If I've done something wrong, I'd really like to know.
You've done nothing wrong.
Then why?
I just can't supervise you.
The first sign that something was wrong was that Dr. Ada wasn't standing where she always stood. Every weekday at exactly 7:30, Dr. Stanley Okoye began ward rounds with his team. Nurses had learned to keep reports ready. Interns had learned not to be late. Residents had learned that if they didn't know a patient's history, they had better know where to find it. He was respected throughout St. Catherine's Teaching Hospital. In 12 years as a consultant physician, no one could remember him humiliating a junior doctor in front of a patient. He corrected mistakes firmly, praised excellence sparingly, and expected integrity from everyone who worked under him, because he demanded it first of himself. Every morning before he entered the hospital, he spent an hour alone with God. After losing his wife 6 years earlier, Scripture had become more than a devotion. It had become oxygen. His work became his ministry. His patients became people God had entrusted to him. His residents became young doctors he was responsible to shape, not only into skilled physicians, but honorable ones. That conviction governed everything he did. This morning, however, something was different. His eyes swept across the group gathered outside the medical ward. 2 residents, 2 interns, the charge nurse. But one face was missing. He frowned slightly. "Where's Dr. Ada?" "She's in the residence room, sir," Dr. Bello answered. "Why is she not here?" Stanley asked with a frown. "She's sick." Stanley looked up. "Sick?" "Fever. She tried to finish her shift last night, but Sister Grace practically chased her out," the nurse chuckled. "That girl doesn't know when to rest." "She was insisting she could join the rounds," Dr. Bello said, "but she suddenly felt very weak and had to lie down." Stanley's brow furrowed. "Has she been reviewed?" he asked. "I don't think so, sir." The answer unsettled him more than it should have. He closed the patient file. "I'll be back," Stanley said, and asked a female intern to go with him. He walked toward the residents' quarters. As he crossed the corridor, memories surfaced uninvited. The first day she'd joined his team 3 months earlier. Quiet, observant, almost painfully polite. He had assumed she'd be like every other new resident, eager for the first week, then gradually careless as fatigue set in. Instead, she'd surprised him. She remembered patients' names. She thanked nurses after every procedure. She stayed behind after rounds to explain treatment plans to frightened families, even when no one had asked her to. Once, he had found her sitting beside an elderly man who had no relatives. "What are you doing here?" he'd asked. She'd smiled. "He said he eats better when someone keeps him company." Another time, she'd quietly corrected an error in a medication chart. When he thanked her, she'd immediately replied, "I should have noticed it sooner, sir." Stanley had found himself thanking God for sending such a promising young doctor into his unit. Nothing more, nothing less. At least at the time. He reached the residence room and asked the intern to check if it was okay to come in. He came in when she affirmed it was. The room was dim. Ada lay asleep on the narrow bed, still wearing her hospital scrubs beneath a hastily pulled blanket. Her usually neat hair had fallen loose across the pillow. Her face was flushed. He stood at the door. She looked impossibly young, not like the composed resident who confidently presented cases during rounds, not like the doctor who somehow managed to smile after 36-hour calls, just a 23-year-old girl who was ill. An unfamiliar ache settled heavily in his chest. His first instinct shocked him. She shouldn't be here alone. Someone should stay with her. She probably hadn't eaten. Had anyone checked her temperature recently? Had she called her family? Without thinking, he took 2 steps toward the bed. Then he stopped. His heart was beating far too fast. "What are you doing?" He frowned at himself. "She's your resident. She's sick. That's all." He forced himself to think like the physician he was. He asked the intern to check for fever. She said Dr. Ada was burning. Ada stirred slightly but didn't wake. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone. "Dr. Hassan," he said when the call connected, "I need you to review one of my residents. High fever. She's in the residence quarters." He made 2 more calls, one to the chief resident to arrange transport home, Another to the nursing station asking someone to bring fluids and antipyretics immediately. Only when he was certain someone was taking care of her did he turn toward the door. His hand rested on the handle. He looked back once. Lord, please let her be all right. He froze. His eyes slowly closed. He had prayed for countless patients, for colleagues, for strangers. Why did this feel different? The thought struck him with terrifying clarity, because he wanted to stay, and that frightened him. Ada recovered within 3 days. Stanley was grateful. He also wished she had taken a week, anything to give his heart longer to recover from the realization that had unsettled him. It didn't. She returned to work exactly as she had left it, cheerful, conscientious, completely unaware that something had changed. Only one thing was different. Him. He no longer lingered after rounds to answer her extra questions. If she was the only resident in the ward, he found a reason to call another doctor over before discussing a case. When she presented brilliantly, he simply nodded instead of offering the quiet words of encouragement he would once have given. If she thanked him for teaching her something new, he answered with a polite, "You're welcome," and walked away. He became careful, painfully careful. Every decision passed through the same question. Would I do this if she were anyone else? If the answer was anything less than an immediate yes, he didn't do it. Every night he knelt beside his bed. Lord, his prayers became remarkably simple. Take this away. Silence. If it's loneliness, heal me. Silence. If it's grief. He stopped. He had loved his wife deeply. Even now, 6 years later, he thanked God for every year they had shared. He wasn't looking for someone else. He hadn't asked for another love story, which made this all the more bewildering. So he prayed the only prayer he knew. Guard her. Then, after a pause, and guard me. Weeks passed. Nothing changed. Except Ada. She couldn't understand what she'd done wrong. The consultant who had once patiently answered every question now seemed almost uncomfortable around her. He never raised his voice, never criticized her unfairly, never treated her with disrespect. But the warmth was gone. She replayed every conversation in her head. Had she missed a diagnosis? Been too familiar? Asked too many questions? One afternoon, she confided in another resident. I think Dr. Okoye regrets having me on his team. The resident laughed. You? Impossible. I'm serious, Ada said. He's harder on everyone these days. The resident replied. But Ada wasn't convinced. She could feel the difference. She simply didn't understand it. Then, almost as suddenly as it had begun, the rotation ended. On the final day, Stanley watched the residents collect their evaluation forms. Ada thanked every nurse on the ward before leaving. She even brought homemade pastries for the support staff, exactly the sort of thing she would do. She walked into his office one last time. Thank you for everything, sir. He managed a small smile. You'll make a fine physician. Her face lit up and she said, That means a lot coming from you. God bless you, Dr. Ada. And you too, sir. She left. The office door clicked shut. Stanley remained standing. For several seconds. Then he closed his eyes. A long breath escaped him. Thank you, Lord. Not because she was gone, but because the battle was over. She would move to another unit, another consultant, another season. His feelings would fade. In time, everything would return to normal. For the first time in months, he slept peacefully. She went for the first board exams and passed. He wasn't surprised. 3 weeks later, the residency committee met to assign specialty placements. Stanley barely glanced at the list that landed on his desk. Then his eyes stopped. Dr. Ada Williams, Endocrinology. Assigned consultant, Dr. Stanley Okoye. He stared at the page, certain he had read it incorrectly. He read it again. The words didn't change. Why in heaven's name didn't she go with cardiology or nephrology? Of all the specialties she could have chosen, it had to be his. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." The residency coordinator entered, carrying another file. "You have a promising new endocrinologist in training," she said with a smile. "Send her to Dr. Maide." The coordinator blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Assign Dr. Williams to Dr. Maide." She frowned, then asked, "Has there been a problem?" "No," Stanley answered with a scowl, hoping his demeanor would stop the questions. "Has she been difficult?" "No." "Then why?" He looked away. "I don't think I'm the right supervisor for her at this time. Let her work with Dr. Maide." She studied him for a long moment. "You've never requested a transfer before." "Then humor me this time." Word spread through the department far faster than Stanley expected. By the following afternoon, Ada knew. She knocked softly on his office door. "Come in." She stepped inside, clutching a folder against her chest. He immediately knew why she was there. She remained standing. "Sir?" He looked up. "I heard you've asked for me to be reassigned," Ada began. He said nothing. She swallowed before continuing. "If I've done something wrong," her voice caught, "I'd really like to know." "You haven't," Stanley replied. "Then," she searched his face desperately. "Why?" Stanley forced himself to hold her gaze. "You have not done anything. I just can't supervise you." Confusion flooded her expression. "I don't understand," she said finally. "I really can't supervise you. Dr. Maide will be great for you," Stanley replied. "Please don't send me away." The words came out almost as a whisper. "I was torn between endocrinology and cardiology. I chose endocrinology because—" she hesitated. "Because I wanted to learn from you." For one dangerous moment, he almost told her everything. Instead, he folded his hands tightly on the desk. "You shouldn't choose a specialty because of someone. I'm afraid I can't train you." Silence. She blinked several times, fighting tears. "I see." She nodded once, a small, polite nod, the kind people give when they're trying very hard not to fall apart. "I'm sorry for whatever I did," she said in a small voice. Before he could answer, she turned and walked out of the office. The door closed gently behind her. Stanley remained perfectly still. Only after several moments did he lower his head into his hands. Outside the office, Ada finally let the tears fall. She had come hoping for an explanation. She left believing she had lost the respect of the man whose opinion mattered most. Inside, Stanley whispered the only prayer he could make. Ada couldn't stop crying, not because she had been reassigned, but because she couldn't understand why. Dr. Stanley Okoye had been one of the reasons she chose internal medicine. Every lecture he gave, every patient he treated, every difficult conversation he had with a grieving family had convinced her that medicine could still be practiced with compassion and integrity. Now he didn't even want her on his team. By evening, she found herself sitting in the living room of the only person she trusted enough to tell, Dr. Miriam Ez. "I just wanted him to tell me what I did wrong." Miriam handed her a drink. "You really have no idea?" Ada shook her head. "He said I hadn't done anything. He said it was for the best." "How is it for the best?" Dr. Miriam asked, perplexed. "I don't know." Ada's voice broke. Miriam frowned. Stanley made difficult decisions all the time, but they were never cruel. This didn't sound like him. She reached across and squeezed Ada's hand. "Stay here." Ada looked up hopefully. "You're going to talk to him?" "I am." Stanley looked up as someone knocked gently on his office door. "Miriam." She smiled and said, "I hope I'm not interrupting?" "Never." She sat down without ceremony. "I've just come from seeing Ada." He lowered his eyes and said, "I thought so." She's heartbroken. Silence. She thinks she disappointed you. She didn't. She thinks you no longer believe in her. His jaw tightened. I believe in her. So, what exactly is going on? He didn't answer. She waited. Years of friendship had taught her that silence often spoke louder than words. Finally, she asked, Stanley, why? You've supervised dozens of residents. You've failed some, corrected others, recommended many, but never, she paused, never have you asked for someone to be reassigned. He looked back down at the file on his desk and said, I think it's best. For whom? For everyone, he replied. But how? Silence. She shook her head gently. There's something you're not saying. If Ada had been disrespectful or incompetent, you would have said so. But instead, you keep saying it's for the best. His fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the folder in front of him. Miriam noticed. Stanley, why is it for the best that you don't supervise her? He closed the file, very carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. It's better for her if I don't supervise her. Better for me, too. Miriam blinked. Something shifted. She studied him, really studied him. His tired eyes, the exhaustion in his face, the sadness he had carried into this room. Then she said softly, Why? His next words escaped before he could stop them. The truth is my cross to bear. Silence. Complete silence. Miriam stared at him. The transfer, the distance, the months of restraint, the grief in his voice, the way he'd said, better for her, better for me. Everything suddenly fit together. Her eyes widened ever so slightly. Oh, Dr. Miriam murmured. Stanley looked up. She held his gaze with a gentle expression in hers. You love her. Time seemed to stop. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. After a long moment, he asked quietly, How did you know? A sad smile touched Miriam's face. I didn't. He frowned. Not until just now. Another silence settled between them. Then Miriam leaned back slowly and said, So that's why. He said nothing. She shook her head in quiet disbelief and said, Stanley, I've known you for almost 15 years. I don't think I've ever respected you more. He gave a tired smile that never reached his eyes. So once she's reassigned, do you mean to ask her? His head lifted immediately. No. The answer came so quickly that it startled even her. No? No. But why? He finally met her eyes. She's 23. I'm 38. I'm her consultant. There is a power dynamic. I won't use it. Ada isn't a child. She won't say yes if she isn't interested. And now, when I think of it, I think both of you would be good for each other. I have known her since she was born, you know. Stanley's voice was anxious when he said, Please stop it. I can't ask her. You can't tell her. Outside the office, Ada stood frozen. Miriam had told her to wait in the car. She had tried. She really had. But the waiting became unbearable. She had only stepped inside to ask the receptionist if they were almost done. Then she heard her own name. She should have walked away. Instead, she stood there, unable to move. Every word she heard made something she couldn't explain bloom in her. The tears came before she realized she was crying. Inside the office, Stanley sighed. I only hope one day. I hope she forgives me. Ada couldn't stay hidden any longer. She stepped into the doorway and said, I'm sorry. Both doctors turned. Miriam's face drained of color. Ada, I told you to wait outside. I know. I'm sorry, Auntie. She wiped her cheeks. I wasn't trying to listen. I only wanted to know my fate. Her eyes found Stanley's. I heard enough, Ada said, looking straight at Stanley, full on. For the first time since his wife died, Stanley looked completely undone. He had spent months protecting her from this very moment, and yet, here she was, looking at him with tears in her eyes. She took one hesitant step forward. "I thought you didn't believe in me, or that I offended you." He closed his eyes. She took another step. She smiled through her tears and said, "But now, I understand." She looked at him with a tenderness that had never been there before. "No man has ever loved me enough to protect me from himself." His breath caught. "I never allowed myself to think of you that way," she continued. "You were my consultant, my teacher, the man I wanted to become like." She smiled softly. "But hearing what I heard today," she took one final step, "I think I'd like the chance to know you, so I'm happy to be reassigned." Silence. "You said," Ada's voice trembled as she continued speaking, "that you couldn't ask." She met his eyes. "I'm telling you that you can." Stanley simply stared at her. He couldn't quite believe the scene unfolding. She was here, in his office, looking at him with a gentleness he didn't know he needed, saying words that were too good to be true. Then, like lightning illuminating a dark sky, one prayer returned to his memory. Months earlier, he had said, "Lord, if these feelings aren't from you, take them away. But if they are, you'll have to open the door yourself, because I never will." His eyes filled with tears. "I already think you're amazing, Ada, and I'd really love to get to know you more." They didn't know it yet, but Miriam would share this story when she proposed a toast at their wedding. For now, there were tears in every pair of eyes, smiles on every face, and two hearts that, at last, were free to choose each other. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's choosing integrity, even when it breaks your own heart. Stanley believed doing the right thing would cost him the woman he loved, but in the end, God honored his obedience in a way he never expected. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. Until next time, may God guide your steps, guard your heart, and remind you that His timing is always worth trusting. God bless you.